Well, good evening. This is my not really my debut, but this is kind of first time I've been up here solo, so we'll see if I get invited back. So I hope you all are doing well. Before we get started tonight, I do want to just tell you guys how grateful that me and Molly are to just have this community. I know that it's kind of different every week on who's here and things, but it's been so beneficial for us to just have this community. Thanks, Dustin, for doing this. It's wonderful, and we love you guys. And it's just a blessing that I get to talk to you guys tonight. So, as Dustin mentioned, we are continuing our series through waiting. And we've considered several aspects of waiting up until this point, several different stories, different speakers. But today, it will be a little different. I had a lot of ideas on what direction I wanted to go tonight because there's so many different instances in the Bible of someone who has to wait or people who are waiting for different things and how we are to react to those things. But the last few days I've been thinking about some just thinking back on the past year and a half of my life, which is my entire married life, and just all the different things that we have had to wait on and things that have just been I don't want to say it's like really really hard times, but for us it's been difficult and just kind of confusing on like just these weird things that we've gone through, and I felt compelled to talk about those things with you tonight and hopes that it will be helpful in us considering this idea of waiting. um, so I don't have a typical exegesis tonight of a particular passage like I originally planned. I was actually going to deal with a narrative story, an overview of waiting for Jesus. As we know in the Old Testament, Jesus was prophesied all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, even all the way to the very beginning almost of creation. There was already prophecies of Jesus, and we continue through the whole Bible, and you can follow those things leading up to Jesus. Thousands and thousands of years of waiting for this Messiah, for this King, for this Savior. And so that's what I was going to go through. And as I studied through that story, that whole um, encompassing overview, 3 points kind of came out of it to me. First, we must realize the wait. We must realize that we are in or we're going to be in or we're just coming out of a waiting season. And so that deals with the prophecies back in the Old Testament that God was showing his people that, hey, this is going to happen eventually, but you got to wait. And the second point that came to my mind was we must work through the waiting. And this is seen through the prophets who were faithful to write down and teach the words that God was telling them. The leaders of the church, most of the time were faithful, some of the time were faithful. Even leading up to John the Baptist, who directly paved the way for Jesus, these faithful people who worked even in the times of waiting. They didn't just kind of sit there and do nothing. And the third point was to enjoy the waiting. Enjoy the waiting. The song comes to mind, Because He Lives, I Can Face Tomorrow. And that's kind of what I was going to wrap up. That was going to be the conclusion of the sermon, was that we can enjoy times of waiting because of what Jesus provides us with. Now, that being said, as I've already told you tonight, we're not going to do that, but I wanted to give you that brief overview to say that those 3 points, as I've looked back on the last year or so of my life, I can see where those points apply directly to things I've been through. And whether I realized it in that time or not, now looking back, I can see exactly how those can apply. So, um, I'm just going to kind of give you basically a little testimony of things that we've gone through, just a little bit of a play-by-play. Hopefully it's not too confusing and you can follow along. There's so many details and things that I'm just going to leave out because we would take forever to get through it. So I hope this is going to be helpful for you. So anyways, I guess it all starts in September of 2024. We got married on September 7th. and we moved directly down to Nashville, Tennessee. Now, this was so that I could finish my degree at Welch College. If you don't know, I'm studying pastoral ministry, and that is the college I chose to go to, which I had already attended for a year and, well, a little better than a year. And so I knew going into marriage that we were going to have to move to Nashville so that I could finish my schooling. And so we already had that in our minds. So we get to Nashville, and immediately we had a hard time adjusting to living in the city, as me and Molly were both born and raised here in Ina. And we knew we wouldn't like it, but we just kept in mind that it was only for a little while, and then we could move back into the country. And after all, we didn't know where my ministry was going to lead after school. So we just had in the back of our minds, like, okay, it's just going to be for a little while, and then we can go back to normal. So a little time goes by, and we both get jobs down there. Molly was working at a little soap factory, or well, it was a little soap boutique or whatever, but it was called the soap factory. And I was working with a roof contracting company in the day, and then I delivered pizza for Domino's at night in between school everywhere. So, needless to say, that was not a fun time to be alive in my life. A lot of stuff going on. So, all in all, though, everything seemed to be going as expected up to that point. But like it usually does, life started throwing us some curveballs. First, it was construction. And what I mean by that is outside of our apartment complex, there was this really beautiful hayfield. And that's kind of what drew us to this particular apartment complex when we originally went down there, was because when you stood out on the balcony, there's just this big hayfield, and it kind of reminded us of home. It felt, homey to us. But not long after we moved there, they started developing that field into more townhomes or apartments or whatever it was going to be. So that meant at 5 a.m. every single morning, our ears were delighted to hear the sounds of heavy equipment and machinery and just dynamite. Actually, they were blowing up rocks and stuff. Pretty terrible, honestly. It was awful. I'm not gonna lie. If you've ever heard like those big track hose with the metal tracks, if a rock gets stuck in there and just like grinds the whole way around, that was our alarm clock every day. It was awful, terrible. So not long after that, we both noticed that our jobs had a very bad work environment, and it was beginning to wear off on us in certain ways. Not so much in the way that we lived, but a lot in the way that we thought about things. Um, in contracting, it was a sales job, so you're constantly trying to get the next sale. That way, you can pay the bills. Because Molly's job brought in a little bit of money, but not quite enough, and delivering pizzas helped out, but not enough. So there was a lot of stress on. I got to make money, and then on top of that, they were always pushing make more money, make more money. There's never enough money, and things like that. So it begins to just wear down on a Christian's conscience when you're constantly in that kind of environment. And there's also just the people that work there were definitely not Christians, and so it's almost begins to feel like you're alone, out there, and you're working with tons of people all the time. But when people don't think the way that you think, you begin to wonder, like, okay, am I crazy? Am I doing like what's going on here? So I think I would ask Molly almost every day, like, is this where God wants us? Like, are we sure that we're doing what's really right here? This just feels like something is just missing. And this is where I would say that we noticed that we were definitely in a waiting season. The first point there. We didn't know how long it would be or where it would lead, but we knew that we had to wait for something else. This was not going to be the permanent situation. Okay, I need to speed up. This is a long story. So then one day I actually received some good news from school, and they said, hey, you're going to be able to finish both your degrees, your bachelor's and master's, online. And this was amazing news because I was like, great, that means we can get out of Nashville because we didn't like it there, all this stuff. We were just very uncomfortable, wanted to get out of the city, all this stuff. So as soon as they told me, hey, you'll be able to finish online, I was like, great, we're gone. So we start looking for where we were going to go next. And we looked literally all over the country. We looked in Florida, North Carolina, Wyoming, anywhere you can imagine. We looked for, okay, where does God want us to go? Does he want us to plug into a church? How is this going to settle out? Um, so finally, after several months of looking, because we had some time before our lease ended there in Nashville, anyways. After several months, a place opened up. It seemed to be the perfect place for us. And compared to our like 800 square foot, 1 bedroom apartment, this place was massive. It was practically a mansion. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, full basement. I mean, the whole thing. And several $100s less a month for rent. Seemed perfect. So just under a year from moving to Nashville, we moved to Cesar, Illinois. Ironically, very close back to where we were back at home. So, very, very, very long story short, the Setzer house wasn't working out. Like right off the bat, was not what it was promised to be. And so now we're in the early summer months of 2025. So church camp is kicking off and it's going on, and Molly is counseling at Camp Hope. And I was like, okay, this is great. She can be out there for a couple, 3 weeks, and I can figure out what in the world to do to this house to make this work. So while I try to fix this house up, it seemed like everything I tried to do, like the harder you worked at it, the worse it got. Like I called up Dustin, he helped me out a ton, trying to get this place settled out, different people looking at it, giving me advice. But it seemed like the harder I worked, the worse it got. Then camp ends and Molly needs a place to stay because, you know, she wants somewhere that she can breathe in. So I have this terrible house, and here I am in the situation. We just moved back from Nashville. We don't have a whole bunch of money because moving's expensive, and we have this wreck of a house. And she gets done with camp, and so we try to stay there, but it only took a few days for us to realize that this house just would never work. No matter what we do, it wouldn't work. We couldn't even sleep in it one night without just getting sick, just from whatever it was in the house. So now we're in a rush to find a new place to live with almost no money and time running out before school started back up for me. And we were both still didn't have steady jobs. But just like always, God took care of us. Molly found a floral job right after that, maybe a little bit before that. My timeline's not exact here, but as I remember, Molly found a florist job right after camp ended, and I was able to find work here and there, just kind of in between all the craziness. And this is where the second point comes in. Work through the waiting. We can't just sit around being lazy and hope everything works, that God works everything out for us. And that's kind of a harsh thing to say. It's kind of a rough thing to think about. But I mean, you can look anywhere in Scripture with where God deals with working and laziness, and it's very clear that He commands Christians that we aren't just to just sit around, and that we aren't. I mean, we are to have faith that God's going to take care of us, but we have to work physically and spiritually. We can't become lazy in our spiritual lives either. And in times of waiting, especially in this situation where we were in, where it's just kind of crazy, you tend to slack off in your spiritual life. And then when your spiritual life starts to decline, your physical life starts to decline. And when both of those decline, you hate your life. Okay, so bad place to be. We have to work through the waiting. We all are probably familiar with the saying, grass is always greener on the other side. This thought kind of hit my head. It makes sense to me. Maybe it'll make sense to you. The grass seems greener on the other side most times because we're not really doing anything to take care of the grass that we're on. You know, I mean, we're like, oh, that's going to be so great over there, while we're standing in a perfect opportunity to make a difference. We're doing nothing with it. And so a lot of times, if we can just take care, to go back to that analogy, if we can just take care of the grass that we're currently on, there's a good chance that it'll be just as green as the grass on the other side, maybe even greener, maybe even better. So about this time, one of our family friends mentioned, this is kind of why we're trying to figure out what to do. One of our family friends mentioned that they would be putting a little cabin in the area. And so we agreed to help them move the cabin down so that we could live in it. Again, God taking care of us by providing us with wonderful, great family friends that were willing to use their time, their money, and their resources to provide us with somewhere to live. It was something that they were kind of going to do eventually, but they weren't really in a hurry to do it. And we were like, hey, we need a place to live, and it just kind of worked out. So we were like, all right, let's put this cabin in. We'll live there. See how long that that'll get us by till at least the next thing. But we still had to wait because this cabin was kind of just like a tiny house, was not even on the property that it was going to be on. It was like nowhere near ready. So we're like, okay, we have this junky house that we're trying to get out of. And now we have a place that we will be able to go to, but there's just this kind of gap. Like, okay, what are we going to do until then? So, take a pause with that story. About this time, I started a construction job full time in Mount Vernon for a general contractor up there. And so that was really good for our financial situation because we didn't really have to worry about income at that point. We're like, okay, money's good, even though we really don't have any payments at this point because we don't have a place to live. So we were like, okay, things are starting to look like they're going to line up. So in this little pinch here, we decided that we were going to move in with Molly's grandparents. They invited us to live with them until we got the cabin set up. And we're like, okay, cool, we can do that. And at that same time, school started back up for me. So now we've got the work, we got the school, and we're living with Molly's grandparents. So trying to juggle everything, we just kept thinking it's just for a little while, then things will work out and it'll all settle down, it'll all be good. We're still in this waiting, and it's just like, how much longer? At this point, we had been like less than a year of this like crazy process. And we're like, how much longer of this craziness is going to be? I think it was about this time that Molly switched to a different floral job. Not that it really matters, but it was just another transition in the mix. So she got another job. Well, it took a long time, but we finally got in the cabin in good enough shape that we decided to move in. It didn't have heat or AC, but the weather was okay. So we're like, it's good enough. Let's just get in there. It was time to get back into a place of our own. So after, I don't know, like a couple weeks of living there, we found out that the cabin also was just not really working out for us. Um, there was it wasn't a bad situation, but it was one of those deals where it's like, okay, I just don't know if this is going to work for us in the time that we have and the time that we are. And so about that time, a widow from our church here said that, hey, I'm going to be moving into a different house, and the house that she currently rented was going to become available. And we were like, oh, okay, sweet. And it worked out because the landlord of that house was a good family friend of ours. So we're like, okay, so now we have a place. And so we moved out of the cabin, like after a very short time of being there. We moved out of there into this new house. And we moved in, and it's like 3-year-old house, super nice. I mean, compared to all the other places we've been, it was great, wonderful. But unfortunately, the construction job I was working at the time was not doing so good. So I was like, okay, we got the house situation pretty much figured out. Now work is just being a big problem. I was not getting enough hours. The people I was working with were, well, hard to work with. And so there's just several people who were like, I don't know if this is the place that you need to be working. So I also had several people that were like, hey, we've got side jobs for you to do if you want to do that. And it was working out really good. I was like, hey, I think I could do this for a living. So in the mix of all the craziness, I was like, hey, let's just open my own business. Let's just go out and do that. So that's exactly what I did. And I started my own little construction job. And that is where we are currently at. Okay, now you are up to speed. I told you it's a very long story. Hopefully, you're able to track all that. That is where we are currently at. In that house, I am working my own job, and she's still working for that particular florist. And we love it. And this home that we live in could be a really good home for a long time. However, oh my goodness, you thought it was over. No, not yet. However, for quite a while, there has been an upcoming ministry opportunity that we have felt that God is leading us to. The issue with this ministry opportunity is that we don't have a for sure answer whether or not we can do said ministry opportunity. However, we feel called to do this. So, again, even though now our house situation is pretty much great, job situations are pretty good, we still feel like there's something missing, and it's that we really feel like it's this ministry. Yet here we are waiting for an answer. And that is where we're at. It's like, okay, God, is this what you want us to do, first of all? And if it is what you want us to do, we need you to show us what to do, when to move, all these different things. So the good news is that we have a comfortable and wonderful house to stay in until we know what steps come next. But there are all these unknowns, and we're waiting on answers. And this is where I think we can apply the third point that I mentioned earlier, which is to enjoy the wait. Enjoy the wait. It is still hard at times to live in this kind of uncertainty, but we know that God has a plan, and all we need to do is continue to put our faith in Him, acknowledge that we are in a waiting season, continue working for Him, and we will be able to actually enjoy this season of waiting. And that's the beauty of Christianity. Like that's what we have that the world doesn't have. They find themselves in these waiting situations because they're always grasping at something else, something bigger, something better. And they don't have enjoyment in the waiting. Whereas Christianity, we can say, yeah, I'm grasping for something else. I think God might be calling me somewhere else, but we can enjoy the time that we have because we are working for Him and we are growing in Him. And I think that can be said of everyone in this room. Whatever your story looks like, whatever season of life you're in, I think we could all say that we're waiting on something, that God has a plan. And we can't forget that. No matter what it is you're waiting on or you have waited for, you will wait for, God has a plan, and we have to trust that. So I'm just going to close out tonight with a prayer. I really hope that some of that chaos stuck with you a little bit and that it was beneficial for you in some way. But I really felt like God was calling me to just kind of share that with you tonight. So I'm just going to close out in prayer, and I want you to just think about your life as it is or things that have happened. And I want you to consider different times that you've waited for things, or what is it that you are waiting for now. And as I pray, just you pray as well and just ask God to show you what you need to be doing, where we need to be going. And then as you walk through these seasons, I would recommend just thinking about those 3 points of acknowledging, working, and enjoying. Let's pray.